Today, I'm going to talk about something very important to me personally, but also I think it's something that is worth telling. I'm going to be talking about Toussaint Louverture presence in Saint Louis du Nord. One of the reasons why I'm focusing on Toussaint's visit in Saint Louis du Nord, especially his visit on November 25th, 1796, was because I've been doing some research on General Jacques Maurepas. General Maurepas was generals who headed the 9th Brigade based in Port-de-Paix, which is the main town in northwest section, northwest province of Haiti. I was born in Saint Louis du Nord, as we call it, and I've always fascinated to know about the main towns and cities and villages pre-independence era of Haiti that participated heavily in the War of Independence against the French. One thing that forces me to zero in on Maurepas is because of his multifaceted. Is someone with different heads, different figures, very unpredictable. Arguably, Maurepas was one of the most skilled generals in the colonial army. He was one of the most beloved by Toussaint Louverture. Also, Toussaint was a familiar figure in Port-de-Paix. So, in my search on Maurepas, I have discovered some interesting revelations, things that I didn't know before. But these are things that I've always questioned because of some of the things they say regarding those who participated from the northwest section of Haiti and in the War of Independence. I have to say that in 1796, the population of Saint Louis du Nord was no more than 5,000 people. We can understand that because on the wake of Haitian independence, the population of Haiti was just a little over 1 million people, and more than half of that were Africans and their descendants. And I would say the remaining third of the population were mainly white or men of color or mixed race individuals. So Saint Louis du Nord in 1796 was no different. It was the reflection, its population reflected at the time the rest of the population at large. In the town of Saint Louis and in the downtown area, there were white business people and mixed race business people and all free blacks business people in the town of Saint Louis du Nord. But in the hinterlands of Saint Louis du Nord, you had African peasants and also the descendants who used to be called the Creoles. I have to say that the word Creole back in 1796 carried dubious meanings. It was not a linguistic tone, so to speak, only. But if you were born in the colony, you immediately are classified as being a Creole, whether you were white, mixed races, or African. So what led Toussaint to that visit in Saint Louis du Nord in 1796, in November of 1796? Two things really brought Toussaint to that famous speech in Saint Louis du Nord. Before we get to November 25th, we have to see what happened in Port-de-Paix in February, and to be precise, on February 20th in Port-de-Paix, the same year. Just like in Saint Louis, the component of the population of port-de-paix also reflects white, mixed races, and Africans. But just like the rest of the colony, on the wake of liberty for everyone, for all slaves, 3 years earlier, I'm talking about 1793, there was still lingering effect because the country was devastated, and Toussaint wanted to show his superiors in Paris that he could lead. Actually, the end of slavery would not immediately mean the end of the prosperity for which Saint-Domingue was known to as really one of the most, the richest colony in the world at that time. But what happened was, to do that, you have to force people to go back to the plantations. And going back to the plantation to work also was very frightening to a lot of Africans and their descendants. And what really made matters worse was the fact that they are back in the plantation. However, the colonial government, although guaranteed that their work would be compensated, would be paid, but too often if they were paid, it was very little, certainly not enough to sustain a decent life. So they rebelled. The head of the rebellion and around port-de-paix was a bossard called Etienne Dati. Dati headed a group of sans-culottes, and Toussaint's army, there was a group of people called the sans-culottes, which means people who were just like Africans in the tribes. They were not properly dressed, but they were skillful fighters. So Dati led a group of 500 fighters who decided to threaten to burn down Port-de-Paix if the dignity was not restored and if they were not being paid accordingly. Toussaint had to negotiate with Dati and guarantee Dati that from then on, their work would be paid. And Toussaint also reminded of, not too far from Port-de-Paix, was the town of Mont-Saint-Nicolas, still controlled by the British. And British control certainly means slavery. So if there was one place in the colony that was still, African was still living in the yoke of slavery, was in Mont-Saint-Nicolas and its hinterlands. So Toussaint had to negotiate with Dati. So the people in Saint-Louis du Nord, they draw from what happened in February. So they armed themselves. At the head of the Saint-Louis movement was a Creole, an officer from the colonial army by the name Nicolas Louis, and a Bossal, which I have yet to know his first name, but he was known as Prudent. He was a Congolese, according to a historical account, he was Congolese. Was born in Africa, just like all the Bossals, but he was determined to live free because liberty or freedom was conceived in 1793 when Sonthonax, with his decree, and declare all slave free, all territories of French, in Saint-Domingue. And one thing that made matters worse in Saint-Louis du Nord was the fact that those who took up arms before in the declaration of Sonthonax's declaration to free all slaves, they were supposed to enlist what they call the colonial army or the National Guard. And those people, headed by Nicolas Louis and Prudent, refused to participate because they were very suspicious of Toussaint for good reason. But they saw despite the fact the commander-in-chief, that was how they used to call Toussaint, his victories over the French, but he seemed too conciliatory towards France in particular. So they didn't trust Toussaint. And they refused to participate in the National Guard in Saint Louis. And they also had long-held grievances against the business people in the town of Saint Louis. So Toussaint moved in on November 25th, 1796. In the center of town, they all came down from all the villages, surrounding areas of Saint Louis. Over 2,000 people poured in to listen to Toussaint. There had to be some serious negotiation with Nicolas Louis and Prudent. In the end, Toussaint managed to convince them. And I have a big chunk of the speech by Toussaint Louverture, but it was too big for me to say that right now. But if you can be a little bit patient, because I'm currently writing a historical novel on Jacques Maurepas, and these passages should be mentioned in the narratives. But I would say this, in the speech in Saint Louis, and I'm going to read it in English, but Toussaint said to the people of Saint Louis, he said, "My friends, there are more blacks in the colony than there are whites and men of color combined." And he was referring specifically to Saint Louis. "If there are disturbances, the republics, which means France, will blame us, the blacks, because we are the strongest, and it is up to us to maintain order and peace with our good example." And Toussaint went on to tell them in Saint Louis that I would rather die 5 times if under my leadership, if slavery to be restored under my leadership. There's no way that I, Toussaint Louverture, will let this happen. Then he said that, "Look at me, I'm as black as you are. Look at me, I look just like you. Look at me, I was once a slave, I was born a slave. But also I want you to look at Mont Saint-Nicolas, not far from here, where our brothers and sisters still living in slavery. And that's what the enemy precisely wanted. If we start fighting against each other among us, then we will become weaker in the fight to raid this colony, this territory of slavery altogether." And then Toussaint tried to use his charms, as he always did everywhere he went, because Toussaint not only spoke Creole, but also he spoke the Ardain language. He switched from Creole to Ardain, but arguably few people could understand him, because most of the people who inhabited Saint Louis, most of the Black, the Africans, and its hinterlands were Congolese and Senegalese. So the parents from Senegal or from Congo, and precisely in the southwestern tip of Congo, in the area that is now called the Cabinda region. So, but he switched into Creole, and he said something to them, the same thing he said to Darty and port-de-paix 2 months earlier. He said, and I quote, "Moun ki ka marche pieds nus, yo ka toujours garder devant pied a yo, s'il pas gagné piquant." Translated, those who walk barefoot, they need to be careful to look at where they step in, and to make sure that they don't step into thorny, which means piquant, which means it's the kind of thorn that can bite you, that can sting you. So, yeah, this speech, according to many historians, was the first sign, because it was the first time Toussaint precisely revealed his intention of becoming the ultimate leader of the colony. So if you want to know more about Toussaint's, you can read this book by Toussaint and Louverture, you can read Black Spartacus, which is the latest, was written by Professor historian Sader Hazari, the latest biography of Toussaint Louverture, of whom I had a very long conversation where we talk about Toussaint and his many places and his many battles and victories against in multiple fronts during the drive to free the colony. And also, if you want to know more about Saint Louis, you can also read The Haitian Revolution, a documentary history. And there are several universities in the United States, in particular, University of Chicago. You can read the document written by Toussaint's son, Isaac Toussaint, to know more about Toussaint and the northwest of Haiti. And one thing I just want to say, I forgot to say that there was a mixed race family in Saint Louis, the Granville family. They're all mulattoes. But also the family lived in both town and port-de-paix and also in Saint Louis. They were very close to Toussaint because Toussaint's youngest son, Saint Jean, was had a tutor, and the tutor was Richard Granville, who actually ended up going to study in Paris because of Toussaint Louverture. So the area was very, very familiar with, and the people in the area knew Toussaint well. So yeah, so this is the thing I just wanted to share with you, and to let you know that this historical novel, I don't know when it's going to be published because it's in its infancy. I have to gather all the documents necessary to begin writing. So hopefully in the coming year, I'll be able to concentrate heavily on this historical novel. Again, Toussaint Louverture and Saint Louis du Nord on November 25th, 1796, for a tremendous speech, a speech that most historians clearly believe it was the first sign on where Toussaint was headed when it comes to his political ambitions in the colony. Again, if you love more, you can always subscribe to my channel. You can always subscribe. And if you do, don't forget to click the notification bell. So that way, every time a video is posted, it will go directly into your portal. It was your humble servant, Ardain Isma. Bisous, bisous.